The probability brief, the Arctic transit pivot and the midnight liquidity cascade. Welcome to the probability brief for Friday, February 27, 2026, the signal check on the world's most telling prediction markets. The probability brief's objective is to deliver clear, data-driven intelligence on how major events are being priced in real time. Each episode examines fast-moving prediction markets, high-impact whale trades, regulatory momentum, and shifts in crowd psychology. The show explains what moved, why it changed, and what the probabilities reveal about the path ahead, making complex market signals accessible, actionable, and easy for listeners to follow. As we move into this final Friday of February, the global probability ecosystems are vibrating with a new, icy frequency. While much of the Western world is focused on the standard end-of-month fiscal reporting, the real smart money has migrated toward the high north. We are witnessing a massive recalibration in the Arctic transit viability markets. This isn't just a weather story, it is a structural reassessment of global trade routes. Markets are currently pricing a significant information asymmetry between localized environmental sensor data and the broader geopolitical narrative of permanent polar gridlock. In our first segment, Signal Mechanics, we investigate how a signal propagates through a global system. Specifically, we are looking at why a single, unverified thermal scan of the Northern Sea route shifted the odds of year-round commercial transit by a staggering 18% in a 4-hour window. This wasn't a slow move, it was a whale trade cascade. At approximately 11:45 p.m. last night, a series of coordinated limit orders hit decentralized platforms, wiping out the no liquidity. This moved the market not because the thermal scan was a definitive regulatory leak, but because the trade itself signaled that a major player had high-conviction data. In probability ecosystems, the size of the trade often becomes the signal itself, creating a narrative contagion that forces every other trader to hedge or be liquidated. Turning to market microstories, we focus on a small but incredibly meaningful movement. A 3% shift in the niche market for ICE-classed hull insurance premiums for Q3 2026. At exactly 2 a.m. Universal Time Coordinated, there was a sudden liquidity spike. This was a mispriced market correcting itself in real time. While the general public still perceives Arctic shipping as a decade-away fantasy, the specific insurance market corrected because of a quiet update in Admiralty law jurisdiction regarding salvage rights in international waters. This microstory is a teachable moment in incentive design. The traders who moved the needle at 2 a.m. were incentivized by regulatory arbitrage, capitalizing on a legal shift before the broader geopolitical analysts even realized the committee had met. For our structural context, we address how markets price tech adoption curves in the face of climate events. As the probability of Arctic passage rises, we see a correlated surge in the autonomous icebreaking drone adoption markets. However, the market isn't just pricing the innovation value of these drones, it is pricing the regulatory friction associated with their deployment in disputed waters. Currently, the probability of the technology working is at 75%, but the probability of international standard approval by 2027 is only 14%. This implementation gap is a structural reality that traders are using to dampen the overoptimism of the tech breakthrough. In our crowd psychology deep dive, we see narrative anchoring at an extreme level. Despite the midnight liquidity flush we discussed earlier, a large portion of retail traders remains anchored to the narrative of Suez centrality. This has created a confirmation cascade, where these traders are only seeking out news that suggests the Arctic route is a black swan event that will never materialize. This is a classic case of attention scarcity. Retail traders are so focused on the loud, established shipping lanes that they are missing the quiet, structural decay of the status quo. This creates a panic dip potential. If a major logistics firm announces a pilot program on Monday, the Suez anchor will break, leading to a violent market correction. Our regulatory trajectory analysis today focuses on the International Maritime Organization's Subcommittee on Polar Code revisions. By interpreting agency signals from their latest draft advisory, we can see a shift in stakeholder incentives. Northern Hemisphere nations are moving from passive observation to aggressive infrastructure lobbying. We are comparing this to the historical analog of the 1950s St. Lawrence Seaway project. The legislative process is moving from the exploratory phase to the funding allocation phase, which historically signals that the probability of the event becoming a reality has crossed the point of no return. In the market memory segment, we look at how prediction markets mispriced the 2024 global freight realignment. Back then, the crowd underestimated how long narratives persist even when the physical data changes. Today, we see the market correcting that past error. Traders are remembering how they were caught off guard by the 2024 Suez disruptions and are now overcorrecting on any Arctic news. This scar tissue in the market memory is why we are seeing such high volatility clusters around shipping news today. For our cross-market correlation segment, we observe that when the Arctic transit market moves, the Midwest grain futures usually follow with a 72-hour lag. When sentiment shifts toward a shorter northern route, the probability of lower export costs for American grain rises, shifting the fair value of those futures. We are also seeing liquidity dry up in Panama Canal expansion futures and reappear in Murmansk port development contracts. This is where the show provides its most sophisticated value, showing you that a change in the ice level in the north is actually a price signal for a farmer in Iowa. Finally, in what traders missed this week, we point to a quiet regulatory filing in the Danish Maritime Authority regarding search and rescue indemnity. While the crowd was watching the naval carriers, this filing suggests that private insurers are quietly preparing to take over the risk from state actors. This is an undervalued signal of narrative decay for the Arctic is too risky crowd. It suggests that the largest insurance syndicates in the world have already run the numbers and decided the risk is now priceable. To wrap up, let's look at the incentive map. Who benefits? Nordic logistics hubs and specialized satellite communication firms. Who loses? Traditional canal-based economies and long-haul fuel suppliers. Who is signaling? The insurance syndicates through their quiet indemnity filings. Who is silent? The major trans-Pacific carriers, which often suggests they are secretly negotiating transit rights before the public market prices them out. This incentive map tells us that while the public conversation is about climate change, the market movement is about trade dominance and operational efficiency. Episode Summary and closing. In plain terms, today we saw that while most people are still looking at traditional shipping routes, a small group of big traders, the whales, used a quiet midnight window to bet heavily on a new Arctic future. We learned that even a 3% change in niche insurance markets can be a teachable moment about where the real risk is being managed. We saw how narrative anchoring keeps most people stuck in the past, while cross-market correlations show that a shift in northern ice will eventually change the price of grain in the Midwest. Most importantly, we found that the silent players, like the major shipping carriers and insurance firms, are already moving behind the scenes to profit from this new reality. Thank you for listening to the Probability Brief. If you found this valuable, please like, subscribe, follow, and share with someone who watches the odds like you do. The sources for today's episode are Polymarket, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Twitter Trends, Senate hearing transcripts, International Maritime Organization, IMO, Draft Advisory Danish Maritime Authority Regulatory Filings. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, or betting advice. All market probabilities are subject to change. Episodes may be generated using fully original, fictional but realistic market movements. Some scenarios, market movements, or examples discussed in this episode may be illustrative or simulated for explanatory purposes.